The chains were the first thing the girls noticed, though neither of them understood at once what they meant. They only knew they made a sound that did not belong on a peaceful afternoon. A dull, metallic clink that carried across the corral and settled uneasily in the chest. The woman stood near the fence, her wrists bound loosely, the iron resting against sun-browned skin. Dust clung to her buckskin dress, and her long black hair hung free down her back, stirred by the wind, as though it wanted to run where she could not. Her face was calm in a way that frightened Lily more than anger would have, but tears slipped down her cheeks without a sound, as if she had learned long ago that crying out changed nothing. Jacob Callahan froze when he realized his daughters were behind him. He had meant to keep them in the house, meant to spare them this part of the world, but the frontier had a way of pushing truth into the open. He had not sought the woman, had not asked how she came to be traded like a mule or a saddle. She had arrived with a debt settled and a silence that felt heavier than any accusation. Now she stood on his land, a living reminder of bargains men made when they stopped seeing one another as human. "Pa," Lily said quietly, gripping her little sister's hand. "Why is that lady crying without making noise?" Jacob swallowed. He searched for words that did not exist. The woman did not look at him, only at the horizon, as if she were counting the distance between herself and something she loved. May slipped free of Lily's grasp and stepped closer, her small boots crunching on the dirt. She tilted her head, studying the woman's face with open curiosity instead of fear. "She looks lonely," May said, as though loneliness were a simple fact like hunger or cold. The woman's eyes flickered then, just once, meeting May's. Something ancient and wounded passed between them. That evening, after supper had gone untouched, the girls stood at the foot of Jacob's bed. The lamplight caught the seriousness in Lily's eyes, too old for her years. "We need a mother," she said, her voice steady but tight, as if she feared the words might break apart if spoken too softly. May nodded, climbing onto the bed beside her father. "And she needs us." Jacob stared into the dim ceiling, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. Outside, the chains shifted as the woman lay down for the night, and for the first time he wondered which of them was truly bound. Jacob learned her name the following morning, though no words were exchanged. The sun had barely lifted over the horizon when he stepped outside with a tin cup of water and a piece of bread. The woman sat where he had left her, back straight despite the hard ground, eyes alert and unreadable. When he held out the cup, she hesitated, then accepted it with both hands. She touched her chest lightly and spoke a single word, soft but clear, as if offering it to the air rather than to him. "Ayana." The sound of it stayed with Jacob long after she lowered her hand, and he repeated it once, awkwardly, hoping she would understand he meant no harm. The girls came next, drawn by curiosity stronger than fear. Lily approached carefully, as though sudden movement might cause the woman to vanish. May, as always, moved without hesitation. She carried a faded blue ribbon, one of the few things that had belonged to their mother. For a moment Jacob thought to stop her, but something in the quiet between the child and the woman held him still. May placed the ribbon in Ayana's palm with solemn care. Ayana's fingers trembled as they closed around it, and her breath caught in a way that made Jacob look away, ashamed of how little he understood. As the day wore on, Ayana remained silent, but silence did not mean emptiness. Her eyes followed the girls as they played, softening when they laughed, sharpening when Jacob came too close. The chains lay loose against her wrists, not biting but never forgotten. When Lily traced letters in the dirt near her feet, pointing to herself and speaking her name, Ayana watched closely, repeating the sound in her mind. She touched her own chest again and whispered her name once more, as if anchoring herself to it. That night, after the ranch had settled into darkness, Jacob lay awake listening to the prairie wind. Then he heard it, a song, low and unguarded, drifting from outside. It was not meant for him or for anyone. It was the sound of morning carried on breath and memory, rising and falling like the land itself. The melody tightened something in his chest he had thought long buried. His wife had sung like that once, when she believed no one could hear her grief. Before dawn, Jacob went to the shed and retrieved the key. When he returned, he knelt and unlocked the chains, loosening them enough to allow movement, to offer a choice, however small. Ayana looked at him then, truly looked. There was no gratitude in her eyes, no submission, only resolve, sharp and unbroken. Jacob understood in that moment that chains could restrain the body, but they had never once touched her spirit. May fell ill 2 days later, quickly and without warning. She had been laughing in the yard that morning, chasing a chicken with determined delight, when by afternoon she lay curled on her bed, skin burning and eyes glassy. Jacob tried everything he knew, cool water, whispered prayers. The clumsy remedies passed between men who survived more than they healed, but nothing slowed the fever. May cried out for her mother in a thin, broken voice that split him open, calling a name that belonged to a grave on the hill behind the house. Ayana had been sitting quietly near the doorway, watching, listening. When May's cries grew weaker, she rose without asking. Jacob started to speak, then stopped. There was something in her posture that demanded space, not permission. She knelt by the bed and placed her palm on May's forehead, closing her eyes as if listening to something beyond the room. She murmured words Jacob could not understand, sounds shaped by breath and belief, steady and sure. From a small pouch hidden beneath her dress, she took crushed herbs and mixed them with water, gently coaxing May to drink. Lily watched from the corner, fear wide in her eyes. When Ayana began to sing, Lily felt it in her bones. This song was different from the one carried by the night wind before. It was stronger, woven with command and hope, rising and falling like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Jacob stood frozen in the doorway, torn between desperation and awe. He had never seen grief answered with such fierce tenderness. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Sometime near dawn, May's breathing slowed, her body cooling as the fever finally loosened its grip. She slept deeply, one small hand curled around Ayana's finger. Jacob sank onto a chair, shaking as the weight he had carried through the night collapsed into relief. He turned his face away and wept silently, ashamed and grateful all at once. When the sun rose, he took the chains from the wall where they hung and walked to the creek. The water was fast from recent rain, brown and restless. He did not hesitate. The iron vanished beneath the surface with a dull, final sound, swallowed by the current and gone. When he returned, Ayana stood near the doorway. She looked at his empty hands, then at his face. No words passed between them. Instead of leaving, she knelt beside Lily in the dirt and helped her press corn seeds into the earth. Their hands worked together, slow and patient. That evening, Ayana sat with the girls and told a story without words, using her hands, her eyes, and her voice to paint memories of mountains and mothers and survival. Lily listened, as if learning the shape of something she had been missing all along. The town noticed the change before Jacob said a word about it. Ayana walked freely now, her movements unguarded, her head held high. She worked beside the girls, her hands steady as she mended clothes, tended the garden, and cooked meals that smelled unfamiliar but comforting. Lily followed her everywhere, eager to learn, while May clung to her with the unquestioning trust of a child who had been saved when the world nearly slipped away. To the townsfolk passing by, it looked wrong, unsettling in a way they could not quite name. Whispers followed wagons, and eyes lingered too long on the ranch fence. Jacob heard the murmurs in town and felt the weight of judgment settle on his shoulders. One afternoon, a man finally spoke it aloud. "You can't raise white children with an Apache woman," he said flatly, as though stating a law of nature. Jacob did not raise his voice when he answered. He only said, "She is free, and she stays because she chooses to." The simplicity of it left no room for argument, though it earned him more stares than comfort. That evening, Jacob struggled to explain it to Ayana. His words came slow and imperfect, his hands moving almost as much as his mouth. He spoke of the town, of their anger, of the danger that might come with staying. Ayana listened without interrupting, her face calm but intent. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she placed her hand over his, firm and warm, grounding him. It was not a promise of love, not yet, but it was understanding. She spoke carefully in the English she had been practicing, each word chosen with care. "I am not owned," she said. "I am here. The girls burst into the room then, laughter trailing behind them like music. May threw herself into Ayana's arms, declaring with unshakable certainty that they were a family now. Lily followed more slowly, wrapping her arms around Ayana's waist, resting her cheek against her side, as if claiming something precious. Ayana knelt and held them both, her eyes closing briefly, her breath catching. "I did not replace one," she said softly, the words halting but clear. "I became one." That night, under a wide and watchful sky, the house felt full for the first time in years. Ayana slept without dreaming of escape, because there was nothing left to flee from. She had chosen her place, and in doing so, had found a freedom no chain could ever grant.